Okay, thank you for the opportunity to join you again. And I did want to mention this morning when I said hello and welcomed everybody, and I said how excited I was for all of you to be here today, I really meant it quite genuinely. The problem that I have is oftentimes what I feel inside and what shows on my face do not match. And our school principals who are here in the room would recognize that, because I'm sure most days when I'm up speaking with them, I don't smile even a single time, even though inside I'm super excited about what we're doing together. So just wanted to clarify that. It's my little moment of vulnerability. And so I've actually been with Rocky View Schools now just for 2.5 years. Before that, I did a similar role in Saskatchewan with Prairie South Schools. And I moved to Rocky View during the pandemic. And so I had a very different sort of introduction to what it was like to work in such a large school division. I came from a school division with 6,500 students, spread across 40 schools, very large geographic area, many K-12 schools, lots of triple grades, as well as a high school that had about 900 students when I left. So it was a big shift to come to Rocky View. Oh, I need the clicker. But it's been a great journey so far. And so we're going to talk about what I've called building a bridge and inclusivity at the Education Center where you sit right now. This is our main office for Rocky View. Just a little bit about us. We have about 28,000 students spread across 50 school sites. We get about 1,000 new students every year. This year we were privileged to welcome about 300 more English language learners than we anticipated. So there are so many opportunities within our schools right now. You can see on the side here, this display that's at the front, this is our new education plan. We are advancing, building, and creating within Rocky View Schools. And that just gives a little bit of information about who we are that's doing that together. So inside this building here, we're separated physically into two wings. There's a wing that goes down that way that is the north wing. That has it has our tech department, our transportation department, operations and maintenance. The busy bees work down at that end to keep the place functioning, the whole district based out of here. We also have then the west wing, which has our learning department, HR department, finance and payroll, our schools department, and superintendent's office. So within this building, although we're all working towards the same ends, we're actually physically divided, which is an interesting dynamic within the building. So I mentioned we have 53 school sites. We're the horseshoe around Calgary, and yes, we are lucky within that horseshoe. We have amazing schools, amazing places for people to work. As I mentioned, about 28,000 students and about 3,000 staff in total. Of course, the bulk of those being about 1,500 teachers and other folks that support the work that we do together. So we have a large geographic area that we cover here as well, and a lot of excellent work that needs to be done in all those buildings based on what a lot of people out of this building have to do as far as the critical components of keeping the infrastructure up and running. It's centered out of this building here. So I mentioned about our education plan, and one of the key features of that education plan is you'll see at the bottom there, the C, creating inclusive, healthy, engaging learning opportunities for all students. And so that has to also include the adults, obviously. I really appreciate a lot of the things that Karen said about culture, because we often get caught up in culture thinking that it's about sort of the rah-rah, the pep rally on Friday, and don't the kids look like they're having a good time. And that's important to the student experience. However, it has to be centered around student achievement as well. And finding that balance between those two things I know can be tricky. So that's just a little bit about us. So why would we be concerned about equity, diversity, and inclusion at what we call here, I should have put it in quotes, the EC. You're in the EC right now. This is the Education Center. They all get a name. Where I worked in my former school division, unfortunately, we were literally on the hill. So, it came from up on the hill, back in the schools, right? And so in Rocky View, it comes from the EC. So you're a part of it now. But why should we be concerned about that? And this is, you can see the credit to the Mental Health Commission of Canada. If you haven't looked at their resources or their website, there's some significantly valuable pieces there. There's toolkits that you can use to get your culture moving in the direction that you want. There's just lots of really good things to think about. In fact, last night, as I was reviewing this, I quickly texted Christine and said, is it too late to change my slides? Because I want to add a bunch more stuff in. Because I had been reviewing this again, and she thankfully didn't respond until a couple hours later when I'd kind of given up anyway. And she said, well, you'd have to talk to Nikki, and Nikki's kind of rough about things like that. So anyway, I didn't. But why would that be important? So where it came from for me is during the early stages of the pandemic, I did a psychological safety online course. And that really highlighted a lot of pieces for me that I thought might be missing. This is when I was in my former school division, that I thought might be missing there. And I thought, how are we going to incorporate this into the work that we're going to do going forward, especially in such a tricky time? So that was an important piece for me. I did a lot of online reading. I read a couple books which I really wanted to reference, and I've loaned them out to other people. So if you are one of those other people, could you give me my books back? Because I can't even remember what they're called, but they were based on, sort of the diversity piece at a central office, not necessarily a school, but at a central office level. So I did some reading. Then I moved here, as I mentioned, in the pandemic. In January of 2021, I started here February 1st, 2021. So as I also mentioned, I had a very different introduction to the Education Center and to Rocky View Schools than I actually would have liked. I wasn't able to go to any of the schools, so on weekends I drove around in each of the communities. I took photos of the schools and I put it on Twitter and said, hey, I can't wait to meet you. But it actually took quite a bit of time before I could physically get into the schools. So that had me wondering about culture and had me wondering about this building. We also had a lot of change in this building. I think a lot of places experienced shifts in the workforce through the whole pandemic. And so we had a lot of new faces, me amongst them, as we came out of the pandemic. So with all of those things in mind, I wondered if it was something that we needed here, some sort of committee to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion for the adults. And one key thing that happened was we had a staff member within the learning department, and she would pray a number of times during the day. And so when the pandemic was on, it wasn't difficult to find a quiet space to do that. There was no designated space, but because the building was only about a third occupied, it wasn't difficult for her to do that. However, as people started to return to work, that became more and more difficult. And as one day as I passed by, I noticed her in the room, in a sort of breakout room, and she was praying, and there were other people also using the room. And I thought, no, this is not right. This can't continue this way. She never brought it up. She didn't ask for anything different or any supports in any way. But it certainly prompted me again to think, how do we make this an even better place to work? It's already a great place to work. When I was first introduced to everybody here by the superintendent, he took me around. He knew everybody by name. 300 people work in this building, and Greg knew everyone's name. And for many, if not most people, he knew something about them. So that let me know that I had landed in a good place. And that type of leadership is pretty critical. So I approached the superintendent and said, I've been thinking about having this committee of some kind. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to call it, but I feel like we need to start addressing some of these issues. We expect our schools to be places of inclusivity. It's an expectation. We have something called the Inclusion Practice Guide that guides the work that we expect schools to do around inclusion. Are we modeling it effectively here? And so that was part of the spark for that. So I approached the superintendent and asked if he thought that would be possible, and we took it to the larger executive committee, and there was support there for the committee. Now, I was willing to do this as sort of an ad hoc thing, sort of off the corner of my desk. get people to meet before work hours or at noon. And I'm really grateful to our Associate Superintendent of HR, Lori, who said, you know, if you're really going to make this work that's valued, it needs to be done during the workday. It needs to be incorporated into the workday. Coming from that teacher mentality where, you know, you did all the coaching, you did all the things after school, and you did all the stuff in the evenings, I was willing to do that. However, I think that was a really key piece to having the committee be recognized as something that's valued and valuable within our organization. So I'm really grateful for that. So then from there, an invitation went out to everybody in this building saying, hey, we're thinking about starting this committee to look at how we can ensure that this building meets our needs around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We had our first meeting, had about 20 people showed up, and then we began to establish the parameters around our work, because it could be really easy to just drift off to the sides of things, and it could be really easy to overlap with our social committee. We have an excellent social committee, Club 41, here at the office. They plan great events all through the year. We have a lot of fun together, play games and do all kinds of things, and we needed to make sure that this didn't overlap with that and become more of a social piece than what they were doing. So we remind ourselves of that often, that this isn't a social club. So eventually, we developed what we now call the Bridge Committee. And so the committee members chose the name, and this is basically what we're about: belonging, respect, inclusion, diversity, growing, and equity. And those are the things that we always try to keep in mind when we meet. We meet the first Tuesday, roughly the first Tuesday of every month at 9 o'clock. And it was really important that when we started that, that we had representation from across the departments. So currently, HR is very well represented. We have the executive assistant. We have a wellness coordinator here in Rocky View. She attends. We have advisors and recruiters. We have staff from our grounds department, our planning department, the learning department, that's me, someone from our learning supports, our learning services, and our learning tech teams. We have folks from transportation, payroll and accounting, communications, and caretaking. And the door is always open to everyone. So people turn over, people get different jobs, people have a big project they have to work on and can't devote the time for a length of time, and that's okay. And I'm actually here speaking on their behalf. So even though I sort of generated getting everybody together, I'm not able to attend every meeting, and somebody else just steps in and chairs, takes over, they make plans, we move forward as we need to. I am the voice that goes back to the superintendent and executive table and says, the Bridge Committee is thinking about this. The Bridge Committee would like to do this, because we don't have any money. We don't have a budget. There was no money for that. There never will be, really, in that sense. So we do find pennies from here and there if there are things that we want to do, and I'll share what some of those things are in a minute. But it's really critical to me that everybody, every department within our education center is represented, because those perspectives are so interesting and unique. And that's what makes places a great place to work, is when all of those unique and interesting perspectives can be heard and have a place and a voice. So after we got together, we thought, well, okay, this is great. Now what are we going to do? So what have we done? So we had our first meeting in October of 2022, so just over a year ago. So we get a few minutes, as much as we want actually, at all of our education center staff meetings. We have a staff meeting in this room that happens, I think we get together like 4 or 5 times a year. I'm not entirely sure about that. I should know, but I don't. And so we ask for time at every meeting, on every meeting agenda. So one of the first things that we did, which really threw people off, and I challenge you to do this when you go back to your staff meetings, is we didn't let people sit with who they wanted to sit with. We made people sit with other people. So we just did it. If you know Peter Liljedahl's work in math, we used an old Peter trick, and everybody got a playing card when they walked in, and that's the table number that they sat at. Because, as I mentioned before, the wings of the building don't bring us together. So down on the west wing, we have what we call the bistro, which is just a little eating area. And down on the north wing, they have one as well. So we don't even get together for lunch or coffee breaks. And many people don't take lunch and coffee breaks. We just keep working. So coming together here and having to sit with people they didn't know, so many people came up to me afterwards and said, that was so uncomfortable, but I met a really cool person. So just taking those little steps to help people feel more comfortable. One of the first presentations we had was from our friend Kirsten, who was the executive director of Airdrie Pride, came and presented to the group on Inclusive Language 101. These are things we expect to happen in schools. We need to model them at the central office level. If we're not modeling that and saying that we're also taking it seriously here, why would we expect staff and principals to take it seriously? We have to be putting that out there. We also have this cool staff directory that we're still trying to get people to use, where they put their photo up and they can put a little bit, not only about themselves, their work-wise, but about themselves personally if they want to. It's not something that we're forcing people to do. So that was one of the big things that we did. After that, we thought, okay, we need to collect some data because we're just sort of operating together with some things that we think we know, but what does everybody else know? So we actually had 94 responses to the survey, which is pretty decent, we thought, considering survey responses are generally not that great. So one of the things that we heard is they want more guest speakers. They suggested that we begin to acknowledge various cultural celebrations and various cultural days around the office. They wanted lunch and learns, and they gave us suggestions for who those people could be. And lots of them are internal to our department or to our operations. For example, at our last Education Center meeting, we had our Director of Indigenous Leadership talk about Orange Shirt Day and what the significance is. You know, going back to Karen's talk she gave us around skills and will. So sometimes we might assume that people are purposefully being ignorant, but actually they don't know. They don't know why we have Orange Shirt Day. So we had Cindy came and talked with us about that. We talked about how to know someone's name in a world where names are different in how we pronounce them, what their origin is, and sometimes we might hear a person's name and the first time we hear it we think, okay, we're going to remember that and we're going to remember how to pronounce it properly, and then like 30 seconds later, if you're like me, you're like, oh, I don't remember how, and you're too embarrassed to ask. So we actually talked about how do you respectfully ask someone what their name is rather than pretend or not call someone by their name, because that, you know, again, going back to relationships, that's critical, is knowing people's names and being able to say them. And then connecting it to faces, which is a whole nother level. We saw that the response was that the leadership needs to lead by example and to help establish a positive culture. So this part of this work is what that is establishing this as a place where people have a voice and can bring forward ideas and suggestions. They wanted more opportunities for the departments to intermingle. They suggested some physical changes to the building, accessible washrooms, a gender-neutral washroom, perhaps flying flags for special events and days. And some noted that they felt included in their own department, but not in the education center as a whole. So then the committee looked at those responses and started to put some action in place. So when you came in the front door, on the right-hand side, you would have seen that banner there that acknowledges the land that we're on. That's our land acknowledgement banner. You would not have seen that welcome sign, but it looks good there, doesn't it? It's not there yet, but we have the mock-up done and it's been approved and it's ready to go. And that was through a lot of consultation with various official and unofficial partners. So talking with our Stoney and Blackfoot and Siksika neighbors and friends about how to pronounce and how to spell welcome. Sorry, not how to pronounce, but how to spell welcome in their traditional languages, along with many of the other languages that we have across Rocky View. So we went through the process of asking, is this right? Is this right? Rather than just having Google do that. So it's taking a little bit longer. We hope to get that in place hopefully in the new year. So trying to help our office reflect what it is that who we want to be. So this is taken exactly from a presentation that we did to the Education Center, just reminding them what we did last year. We formed the committee, which we were pretty excited about. As I mentioned, we did the survey. We're adding each other's names. We've got the land acknowledgement banner and the welcome sign in the front entry in various languages that we're working on, and a few other things that we've got in the works. So actually, when I was looking at this slide last night, I was like, oh, I don't know. The first bullet on there is permanent reflection room, and then the sign is a washroom. So the washroom will not be the permanent reflection room. I thought, oh, that I could have done a little bit better. I know there's a lot of reflecting that can go on in there, but that's not what we're encouraging in the workplace. So we currently do not have an all-gender washroom here in our office. So that's something that we'll need to explore, which, as you know, if you've done any kind of washroom renovation, we're looking at a pretty significant investment in dollars. So it's not that it's not going to happen, but it's probably going to take a little bit longer. But that piece about the permanent reflection room, so we actually then did just not long ago, this fall, we had a staff member come forward to a bridge committee member, not to their department supervisor, not to anyone on the executive team, but to a bridge committee member, and said, I need a quiet, private space to engage in my religious practices, and I'm feeling like I don't have that here. So through lots of consultation and discussion, we have established a temporary, and maybe reflection room isn't the right title for it. We haven't fully sussed that out yet, but that's what we're calling right now, the room where folks can go and engage in those practices. We have a number of meeting rooms back there. You can see a couple of them along the hallway over there when you go to the washroom. But behind the locked doors, we have a number of meeting rooms that are in very high demand. They are in use all day long, all year long. You go into a central booking space online and you can book a room. So for us to set aside a room for those practices to take place is a pretty significant step forward for us. Now we need to make that more permanent. And so we'll be talking about that actually at our Education Center staff meeting that's coming, I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon. We'll be talking with the staff here about what that is and what is happening in that room, and then asking for their input on what they feel we could do for a permanent solution. Because it's not only about that individual's spiritual practices, we need a place to honor other spiritual practices, as well as even a place for if you're a nursing mother and you need a quiet place to go. If you are a person who, maybe you suffer from headaches, you feel like you can come to work, but then once you get here, like, oh, I just need to go to a quiet space for 15 or 20 minutes, and then I can stay at work. All of this contributes to the wellness that we're looking for. All of this contributes to people wanting to come to work every day and wanting to stay within Rocky View. As many of you would have experienced, like I said earlier, there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of change about what people expect from their employer, and we need to make sure that we're honoring those pieces. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We'll take the information back to the Bridge Committee. The Bridge Committee will sit down, go through what folks have told us for feedback, and then that information eventually goes back through me to the executive team and the superintendent for further discussion and determination. We have a number of presenters that we're lining up for staff meetings and lunch and learn sessions to carry out throughout the year. And we're pretty excited about what those opportunities will provide for us. So what have we learned? What have I learned? As I mentioned earlier, the critical piece of this for me and for us is that we need to walk that walk. We have that expectation in our schools, and are we modeling it and demonstrating it here? We haven't talked with our school principals, and there are a few of them here today, about this work. and that this is something that we're doing here at the office. And that's sort of, the part of the iteration as we move forward is how do we share this back out with the schools? Not that there's an expectation that they have a bridge committee at their school. I mean, that would be great. They have lots of little mini sort of bridge committees that are going on all the time. But how do we continue to demonstrate our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and making this a safe and welcoming place for folks to come to work every day, because that is all part of that wellness theme that we're on. The importance of leadership support. So as I mentioned before, our superintendent, when he took me around and introduced me to everybody, like I said, he knew everybody by name. Relationships matter to him. They matter to him all the time. So there has never been a single piece of pushback when we've brought something forward, when we've asked for time, when we've raised ideas around what we might do to make this a more inclusive building. We haven't had any pushback, and I don't anticipate we will. We will have an interesting conversation when we start talking about bathroom renovations, though, because we have the space. We know exactly where it should go, and everybody agrees on that. It's just about the finances at this point. I've learned, and we've learned as a committee, a lot about staying in our own lane. And so as I mentioned before, we've got Club 41, which is a great social club that we have here at the office. We also have to be sure that we're not drifting into lanes that are HR work, or drifting into lanes that, are things like, oh, we could get the schools to do this. Oh, or we could do it like the school's doing it, because we aren't actually a school, right? Although that's our key work. This is an office, and it functions differently from a school. And many of the people in this building have not been in a K-12 school since they were in a K-12 school. They might have had post-secondary training of some kind, but not in a school sense like we're used to, K-12. And then the importance of collaborating with others, which I go back to, working with Airdrie Pride, working with our Indigenous elders around the sign, working with other religious groups, and those are not decisions for me or the committee as individuals to make, but those are things that we have to do together. And that is also part of keeping to our parameters and remembering the scope of our work. So I see I had the 5-minute sign there. I think I'm just about there. Yep. Okay, so I would actually like to turn it back to you as Karen did and ask you to have some conversation at your tables. When you hear all of that and the things that we're doing, you might have thought, oh, I wonder why they didn't do this, or oh, it would be a great idea, or in our school division we do this. So I'd like to offer you the opportunity to talk at your tables for a few minutes about when you heard that, what do you think we might be missing? Or what do you think you would offer to us as suggestions for where we could or should go next with our bridge committee? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to talk, and then we'll bring it back together. I'll stop you there and ask if anyone has any suggestions, questions, ideas. I'm just going to take it back to bridge because some of the folks online wanted to see that again. Any questions, suggestions, thoughts, ideas? We are here to steal good ideas. One that came from this table, which I will definitely take back to the committee, is on our welcome sign. I don't think we have the sign language signs for welcome on there. And we don't have the PEC symbols either. I'm pretty sure we have the Braille, although you might not have seen it on there, but I'm pretty sure we have the Braille. So that was an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Check. Alison Hancock, she said that we adjusted our school calendars to provide non-operation days for our Muslim students, so they were not taking time away from schools to celebrate EID. We monitor our community of staff and students and do our best to adjust school calendar to honor these religious holidays, so that folks don't need to ask for time off. And also we are working with Alberta Education to have them review diploma calendars for the years that EID falls on a diploma writing date. So basically, like they're working on adjustments during the school calendar.
That's awesome. Thank you, Allison, for that, for leading that work. And that just reminded me that the other thing that we're working on right now is a year calendar that has numerous religious observances and celebrations on it that will add to our, it's called MyRVS, it's our local internal staff room type of thing. And if you're interested in that, Peel School District in Ontario does all of that legwork for you. And so you can actually download it from their site. It's called Days of Significance. You can download it from there, and then there were a few that we added in and that we took out, and we're going to have that posted internally here shortly. That's another thing that the superintendent has approved. So thank you again, Allison. Okay, I think that's it for me. I think I had one slide left that said thank you. Yeah, okay, wonderful, thanks.